Welcome back to the second hour of our program. On the line with us, Professor Richard Wolff, the economist, co-founder of democracyatwork.info, the author of numerous books, including his most recent, The Sickness is the System, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself, now available as an ebook. He's also the host of Economic Update with Professor Richard Wolff right here on Free Speech TV and democracyatwork.info, Prof. Wolff over on Twitter. Professor Wolff, I'm looking at this 2 million barrel a day production cut that Saudi Arabia, Russia, and OPEC Plus just agreed to. And two possible explanations come to mind. And I'm wondering what other ones you have and what you think the impact of it will be. One is that they're looking at the world economy as the United States is raising interest rates and basically forcing most other countries to do the same, or else risk currency devaluation, and thinking this is going to throw the world into a recession. Recessions reduce the demand for oil, so we need to cut production so that our price remains solid. That's one possible explanation. The other is that they're looking at Biden and the Democrats and saying, screw those people. Russia hates Biden because of Ukraine. Saudi Arabia hates Biden because they're friends with. I mean, their guys were in Bedminster just a couple of weeks ago hanging out with Donald Trump. This would be the October surprise. This year's October surprise. I'm curious your thoughts on the why and the consequences.
Well, I think there's so many issues being wrapped up here. It's hard to figure out what's the most important. Let me try. I think on the most basic level, we are seeing a world in which all the old arrangements, the understandings are disappearing. The position of the United States simply isn't strong enough anymore to control what's going on the way it had been for half a century, including the oil market. Europe is going its way. Russia its way, China its way, and the United States. And the message to everybody is, you better check and take care of yourself, because you cannot rely on a global economy, because the role of the United States as running it is over. In the case of oil, you're absolutely right, what you listed. Falling demand, a recession predicted for the end of this year and all of next year, led by predictions from Americans, by the way, Nouriel Roubini and a whole lot of others. And so the demand for oil has already come down. We're at oil below $100. They need it in the Middle East and in the oil-producing countries, about 25 of them now in OPEC Plus. They need the price up. And they want the price up, and they don't really care about anything else. They feel their interests have been damaged by the United States. You might mention there that Biden has used reserves from the American oil reserves to lower the price, release 75 million tons of the stuff, barrels of the stuff. It is an act of aggression in their minds. You've lowered the price of what we depend on. Russia is in the very pleasant position of being able, by doing this with Saudi Arabia and the others, of jacking up the price of oil and gas, which is what they sell, and which will help Russia pay for the war in Ukraine, which it already has been doing and will now do even more so, emboldening Russia for whatever it has on its agenda. And everybody's doing what the economy leads them to need to do. And they're not going to be held back, not only by blandishments from the United States, but the threats of the United States are falling on deaf ears. They're not frightened anymore. And you can see that across the board as India buys the oil and gas from Russia, as most of Asia and Africa do. Italy just went out of its way to make sure it can continue to buy gas and oil from Russia. More and more, that's what this is about. And that it makes difficulties for Mr. Biden by raising the price of gasoline just as we go to the election, knowing how much Americans fear that, knowing that it's going to make the inflation even worse as it works its way through the system, since everything depends on oil. I think what you're seeing is more and more evidence of the unraveling of the understandings and the power relationships that most of us over 40 years of age thought were permanent because they had been there all our lives.
Yeah, I totally get it. So I'm looking at a couple of different ways that the Biden administration, the federal government, could respond to this. One is to, which would require legislation, I believe, to reverse the 2015 change in law. From the 1970s until 2015, it was illegal to sell American oil outside the United States, which meant that the United States was largely energy independent, and it kept our, so if they could reverse that, number one. Number two, the United Kingdom has put windfall profits taxes on their oil companies, and they're cycling that money back to consumers. That's something we could do. Number three, we could break up the big oil companies. I realize that's something that's going to take years to do, but, even starting the process. It seems like there are, another one is we could start importing, we could change our foreign policy with regard to Venezuela. We've got refineries along the Gulf Coast that were originally built to deal with high sulfur Venezuelan oil. When we embargoed them about a decade ago, that's why they started pushing so hard for the Keystone XL pipeline, because that's the same kind of high sulfur oil coming down from Canada, specifically for those refineries. In fact, I think the Koch brothers owned one of them at one point. So these are some of the things that are possible. I mean, any of those have resonance with you, and do you have other thoughts about what we can or should be doing to deal with this double whammy of inflation and high oil prices?
Yeah, I mean, we are a major oil producer. We are in position to take all kinds of steps because of that, that other countries can't, and that Americans are going to have to get used to sooner or later. They may sound wild now, like your list may sound shocking to some people, but shocking is what we're living through. And more shocks, I guarantee, are coming down the pike. We could control inflation by a wage price freeze. It doesn't have to be an equal freeze on everything. We can freeze oil prices here, produced in the United States. That's an alternative to a windfall profits tax, because it means that you are recycling by not letting the price of oil go up in the first place. There will be problems if you make the United States self-sufficient in oil and gas by holding it here, because there is then no chance for the Europeans, who are on the edge of trouble as it is because of cutting off of Russian oil and gas. They are going to rely on the United States. Big investments have already been made because the United States producers to make the money from being able to sell to a desperate Europe at a
LNG.
very high price. Yeah. The Europeans are not happy with that situation. Under the table, quietly, they are cutting their deals too. And as governments break out of the relationship with the United States, like the Italians are about to do, we are going to see more and more of this evidence that you better come up with some remarkable new deals, re-looking at the Venezuelan oil as yet another way to play, rethinking the smashing of Iraq, because if it produced oil, could then also alter the dynamics of all of this situation. I think we are going to see big changes, but unfortunately, they keep coming only under the pressure of the catastrophic events that happen because we didn't think about it beforehand. We weren't willing to take new steps like the ones you just listed. That continues to be the dominant politics in the United States. Why we are surprised, just between you and me, that they decided to cut back oil. That's what they wanted to do. That's what they told us. We just pretended we didn't have to worry about it. We don't have that power in this country anymore.
Amen. Well said. Professor Richard Wolff, it's always a pleasure having you on the program. Thank you for dropping by.
Thank you, Thom.